Hi, my name is Yvette Bill, and I'm the Director of Human Resources for Level 2 Legal and also the leader of our diversity and inclusion initiatives. I am super excited today to join Sylvia and the Buying Legal Council to produce Moving the Needle, What the Legal Industry Can Do to Improve Diversity and Inclusion. I am honored to have Akshay Verma here with me today, who is the head of legal operations at Facebook and an adjunct professor at Santa Clara University School of Law. As you know, Facebook is the world's largest social media platform with more than 2.2 billion monthly active users. Akshay has been in the legal ops at Facebook since 2018 and also leads their diversity and inclusion initiatives with their outside counsel. We're excited to hear from Akshay today. Akshay, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Trying to get used to this brave new world of everything that's been going on. I'm 43 and I can't remember a year that was even close to the kind of chaos that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 months. So it's really been quite a ride. But today feels like a good day.
Absolutely. So you mentioned all of the craziness going on in our communities today. What types of information do you have to share with organizations who are looking to put together an initiative to combat the cry for reform and justice in our communities today?
Yeah. Uh, Great question. For me, I think one of the most important aspects of any kind of change that you want to affect, and whether that's around racial inequities, whether that's change management and legal operations, I think awareness is a really important starting step. So raising that in some fashion across the organization, and that's understanding the problem, the root causes of the problem, understanding the scope of the problem, understanding who the players are, how it affects people, what the inequities are. I think if you can raise that level of awareness within your own organization, within your groups, I think you're much better set up for success if you actually want to affect some change. And I think it always starts internally, right? Before you go out there and start trying to change the world, you want to make sure that your own house is in order, and that you're doing the right things internally.
You mentioned raising awareness within the organization, being taking into account your diversity and inclusion experiences and those in your network. What are some initiatives that they have implemented to bring that awareness to their internal organizations?
I'll use a couple of different examples. One that I just really valued that Facebook did. The company essentially had Juneteenth off for the first time. And I don't mean we had it off as in go do whatever you want. They set up a lineup of speakers that was just unbelievable. We're talking ethnic studies professors. We're talking Eric Holder, who did a conversation with our general counsel, movie directors and producers, authors. We had the family members of some of the folks who've been killed over the last few years by police violence. And to me, that was an opportunity for all of us as a company to learn from them, to hear from them firsthand. And I think that is to me, that goes along with the concept of raising this awareness. Anytime that you hear about these stories in the news, you're a degree or two or three maybe removed from it. We're all kind of desensitized to the news. But when you hear from a family member, and granted it's virtual, you're not there in person, but when you hear from that family member, there's a humanization that takes place. There's a connection that takes place. Facebook, our mission is to connect people and build communities. That's the mission of the company. So to have the opportunity to hear from all of these amazing speakers on that particular day, for me at least, was a great step towards creating and continue to create that awareness around these issues. So that's kind of one thing that I think I really value, and I would encourage any organization to try and create that kind of an atmosphere. But again, that's one step of the process, right? There's so much more that needs to be done. So a couple of the other things that we're doing, certainly trainings. So along with awareness, you have to be aware of your own implicit bias. Everybody has it. Like, can we just get over that? Can everybody just get over the fact that everyone has implicit bias? And that's not the bad thing. The bad thing is not being aware of it and not doing something about it. So we have some great trainings that I've undertaken, and I think we have some on a regular basis that will now be required for the company and certainly for the legal department around implicit bias and managing bias. So for us managers at Facebook, like that's an important training that we all are required to take. And then the third piece, which I think has picked up more steam, so legal departments, certainly law firms, they do all kinds of pro bono work across communities and across areas, whether it's doing DACA application renewals or immigration clinics. I used to do a number of pro bono cases in my law firm days for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco, where they would have indigent clients who would need legal representation. So Facebook has done that for years across a variety of different areas. We've ramped up those efforts, especially in the last month. I think there's so much energy around people wanting to be involved and wanting to contribute. So we really want to harness that energy and put it to good use in the legal community as well.
So you mentioned the attorneys and the legal industry really getting involved in the communities and wanting to make a change. I know back in January of 2019, there were several general counsels who got together, signed a letter to demand that there be change as far as diversity and inclusion goes. What changes have you seen in the past 18 months based on the letters that were signed?
Yeah. So I don't know that I can directly tie the letter to it from a causal perspective to any changes that I've seen. I will say, for me, the most important result of that letter was that the conversation was much more possible. And I think that again goes to the concept of awareness and accessibility to those issues. So I think that was a great piece for the legal industry itself. I think if you slice and dice diversity statistics in any way that you want across the law firm world, and certainly in the legal industry, but especially in the law firm world, it's abysmal. It's horrible. When you look at power, where the power lies in law firms is at the equity partnership levels, and the diversity metrics at those levels is horrible. Like it needs so much work. So my hope is that, and I think we're starting to see this, and I'll share some of the statistics that we've seen at Facebook in our efforts. But my hope is that the conversation is taking a different kind of force than it was before. It may have been window dressing before. It may have led to, law firms, especially setting up, web pages for diversity and inclusion on their websites and so forth, but not really doing anything about it. My hope is that that's now really starting to change. At Facebook, we've been measuring diversity for about 3 years now. We've really kind of focused how we measure our law firms on diversity. And we did kind of a year-over-year trend analysis just in the last month or so, and we've seen significant improvement in a few key areas with our law firms. One is just how they staff our matters with diversity. That has increased. That's good. That's kind of the baseline. But diverse lawyers on our matters are starting to get more leadership opportunities, and leadership opportunities lead to client relationships, which we hope can affect the balance of power, because that will help those diverse lawyers become partners. And that's the direction that we want to push the law firms in the legal industry.
Very nice. So you mentioned the clients that Facebook uses for their matters, as well as earlier you mentioned bringing on awareness and having awareness of what is going on in the community. Coupling those two together, how would you recommend, or do you have any tips on how organizations can diversify their spend when it comes to looking at vendors and looking at clients?
Yeah. So I'll take vendors first, because we have an established program at Facebook, not just within our legal department, but across the company for vendor diversity. So there are certain kind of onboarding processes and certain areas where we really focus efforts on bringing on diverse suppliers. On the law firm side, the process and kind of the concepts are really no different. I think the hurdles that many organizations will come up against, and this is really, to me, is the function of the concept of pedigree in the legal profession, right? Typically speaking, the pedigree is about large law firms, top schools, and the diversity in those areas is lacking to begin with. So you're already starting with a mix that's not going to help you achieve those kinds of goals. And on top of that, there's certainly a perception that if I want really good legal work done, if I want good quality legal work, I have to go to a high price white shoe firm, right? There's that perception. So you have to overcome all of that just to even think about moving work to a minority owned firm, or to a NAMWOL firm. You really have to focus on that as an effort, and sometimes even change perception. But I think, and I'll borrow this from the legal operations side, there's a concept called work segmentation in legal operations, which is making sure that the right kinds of external partners, whether it's law firms or vendors, are doing the right kind of work from the tiered approach of work segmentation internally. And I think you can do that to help increase your spend with women and minority-owned firms. You can take a look at who's currently doing your top tier work. Do you require the top tier firm for that because they have the scale and the infrastructure to do that? Otherwise, there's plenty of other work that may currently be going to that firm that doesn't need to go to that firm. And I think that's a real opportunity that clients can undertake, that in-house departments can undertake if they want to increase their spend profile with women and minority-owned firms. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect goes back to, companies like ours. We have to use some of those big firms. It's just the scale of our work. We're a global company. We need that kind of global support. So really pushing those firms to make sure that we have the right kind of diverse lawyers, partners, and associates doing work on our matters.
I have a bit of a challenging question for you. Focusing on the diverse spend and really bringing awareness to diversity and inclusion as a whole can sometimes have an adverse effect and make others feel not included. So what are some tips you have for organizations to make sure everybody feels included, even if the focus is on minorities and women?
Can I challenge that question and the premise of that question a little bit?
Sure.
Because the focus is not on minority and women. It's not on minority and women-owned firms. That's part of the problem. So I think even with the increased focus, I don't think you're anywhere near the equity that you need to be able to say, hey, we need to make sure that we're including everyone. So I don't know if that's a bit of a non-answer to your question, but I guess a simpler way of saying is, like, I guess I'm not too worried about that. And if that's an issue that's being raised, my hope is that people can understand the underlying causes for the inequity and understand why we need to increase that focus right now. I mean, it's the same concept of Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, right? Yes, of course, all lives matter, but all lives won't matter until Black Lives Matter. So to me, it's a very kind of analogous situation with women and minority-owned firms and kind of your white shoe firms.
Well, thank you, O'Shea, for your time today. Are there any tips that you want to share with organizations as we close today?
So awareness of the issues is great. I think discussion of the issues in an open, transparent, non-judgmental way. Eric Holder said something in his remarks during his conversation with our general counsel, which really stuck with me, which is that, yes, on a national level and probably on a global level right now, we are having this conversation around race in a way that probably has not happened, I won't say ever, but certainly in a really long time in this country. I'm an immigrant. I came here as a young child, so this is my country. I fully have grown up with these issues, in the time that I've been here. But for the first time, the scale and depth of these conversations feels good. It feels real. I hope we can continue that momentum. I hope we can turn those discussions into legislative action. I hope we can turn it into actual change on the local level. I live in San Mateo County. We are having active discussions as a community with the sheriff's department in San Mateo County, with our city council members. So I think holding organizations accountable for the change that they want to affect, holding themselves accountable for actually realizing those changes is incredibly important, because we've seen time and time again, these things happen, conversations happen, but they don't really actually turn into actual change. So my hope is that organizations are able to do that.
Very good tips. Thank you so much for your time today. It's a pleasure that you took time out of your day to meet with us and support Sylvia and the Buy-in Legal team. And I appreciate all that you've shared. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.